My heart pounded as Greg slapped me hard across the face, the sting searing through my skin and rattling my senses. I staggered back, still reeling from the shock, but he wasn't finished. In one swift motion, he grabbed a bucket of paint left in the hallway from a recent project and dumped it over my head. The cold, thick paint cascaded down my face, into my hair, and soaked my clothes. I stood there, drenched, as a mix of humiliation and fury built within me. Greg's twisted smile told me he was reveling in my helplessness. My name is Clara, and I'm 43 years old. For years, I've been obsessed with Spanish soap operas, especially the ones with plots packed with betrayal and deceit. I used to joke that my love for drama was safely confined to the screen, but life has a way of surprising you. I never thought I'd find myself in a twisted plotline that rivaled any soap opera. Yet here I was, covered in paint, humiliated by the man I once loved. 6 years earlier, I was blissfully unaware of the storm that would one day engulf my life. Greg and I had been married for a few years. He was nearly 10 years older than me, and though we hadn't been blessed with children, I thought we had a good life together. Greg had always been protective, even a bit possessive, but I attributed it to his protective nature. Then, one evening, I received a call from my childhood best friend, Lillian. "Clara, it's been too long," she began with a sigh. "I just wanted to let you know, I got divorced." The sadness in her voice was unmistakable. "Oh, Lillian, I'm so sorry. That must have been so hard on you," I replied, the news catching me off guard. We had been close for years, but life had taken us in different directions. "Let's meet up soon for drinks. You shouldn't go through this alone." When I got home, I was ready to share the news with Greg, but before I could say a word, he surprised me by saying, "I already know about Lillian's divorce." I paused, taken aback. "Wait, how do you know that? I haven't mentioned it to you yet." His face remained blank, but his tone was oddly dismissive. "I must have overheard it somewhere," he replied, shrugging. His casual tone didn't sit right with me, but I let it slide. I told him that I'd planned to meet Lillian for drinks, and to my surprise, Greg asked, "Mind if I join you too?" Confused by his sudden interest, I hesitated. It was supposed to be a night for me to support my friend, but since Lillian was a longtime friend of ours, I agreed to ask her if he could come. Surprisingly, she sounded thrilled at the idea. The three of us met up the next evening, and Lillian spent the night venting about her ex-husband, who turned out to be a controlling and unfaithful partner. We laughed, toasted, and shared stories, enjoying a night that felt both nostalgic and comforting. At one point, I excused myself to use the restroom. When I returned, however, I saw Greg and Lillian sitting closer than before, their heads tilted toward each other, engrossed in a quiet, intense conversation. The way they looked at each other made my stomach twist. They hadn't seen each other in years, so how had they become so close after just a few drinks? I wondered if I was overreacting, but the unsettling feeling wouldn't go away. I sat back down, and they quickly broke off their conversation, acting as if nothing had happened. The rest of the evening went smoothly, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. As we wrapped up and prepared to leave, Lillian was noticeably tipsy. Greg offered to take her home, catching me off guard. "I'm your wife, Greg. I can make sure she gets home safely," I said, feeling a sudden need to assert my place. He brushed me off with a smirk. "Clara, she lives on the opposite side of town. Just go home and get some rest. I'll handle it." Despite my objections, Greg insisted that I head home alone. Left with no choice, I reluctantly agreed, but a seed of doubt had taken root in my mind. Once home, the uneasiness turned into suspicion. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that there was more between Greg and Lillian than I understood. After pacing the living room for an hour, I made a decision. Driven by instinct, I entered Greg's study, a room he guarded fiercely. This was a private space where he kept his work files and personal belongings, but I couldn't stop myself from searching through it. I'd opened drawers, sifted through stacks of paper, and finally found something I hadn't seen before: an old, dusty photo album hidden in the back of a cabinet. My heart pounded as I flipped it open, and the photos inside confirmed my worst fear. Greg and Lillian were in nearly every photo, smiling and wrapped up in each other's arms. The dates on the back of the pictures were from years ago, shortly after our wedding. My fingers trembled as I realized that they'd been seeing each other all along. The betrayal was more profound than anything I'd ever experienced, and the realization hit me like a tidal wave. My best friend and my husband had been lying to me for years. Just as I was putting the album back, I heard the front door open. Greg was home. Quickly, I composed myself, gripping the album tightly as I walked out of the study and into the hallway. He found me near the bathroom, feigning nausea as a cover for my shock and anger. Concern filled his face as he approached, reaching out to rub my back. "Oh, are you throwing up?" he asked, his voice soft. "Don't touch me," I snapped, the bitterness barely contained in my voice. He looked confused until I raised the album, holding it up as a silent accusation. Care to explain this? His face drained of color. For a moment, he was speechless. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he shrugged and muttered, "Fine. I cheated, Clara. I know it was wrong, and I'm sorry." But there was no remorse in his voice, no regret. His coldness was like a second slap. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "You and Lillian? After everything we've shared, everything I thought we had." He looked at me, an odd calm in his eyes. "Lillian and I, we're soulmates, Clara. We were both trapped in the wrong relationships, and I made a mistake marrying you." I stared at him, hardly able to believe my ears. "Soulmates?" I echoed, disbelief lacing my words. "Is that what you call betraying your wife and sneaking around with my best friend?" He crossed his arms, his arrogance glaringly evident. "Our souls are aligned, Clara. I made a mistake marrying you. We aren't compatible. Our vibrations, they're off." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Vibrations? Are you serious? You betrayed me and lied to me, and now you're justifying it with spiritual nonsense." He shrugged, not even flinching. "You wouldn't understand. You're too oblivious to my needs." Before I could respond, his face twisted with frustration. Then, without warning, he raised his hand again and slapped me hard across the face, sending me stumbling backward. My cheek throbbed as I steadied myself, but he didn't stop. He grabbed the bucket of paint from the hallway, and, before I could react, he poured its contents over my head. I stood there soaked, feeling the weight of betrayal and humiliation crush me. Greg looked at me with a smug satisfaction, as if he had proven some point. Wiping the paint from my eyes, I found a calmness within myself that surprised even me. "You have no idea what you've done, Greg," I whispered, a promise of retribution clear in my tone. He merely smirked and walked away, brushing off my words as if they were nothing. Once he was out of sight, I forced myself to take a deep breath. I grabbed a towel and began cleaning myself up, feeling my anger harden into resolve. I knew I couldn't let this humiliation slide. I couldn't let him win. After cleaning up, I went straight back to his study. I already suspected he might be hiding more secrets, and now I was determined to uncover them all. I rummaged through his drawers and shelves until I found what I was looking for: bank statements, receipts, and financial records that painted a disturbing picture. Greg had been secretly funneling thousands of dollars into a private account I'd never seen before, likely to support his life with Lillian. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. He hadn't just cheated on me emotionally, he had stolen from me financially as well. I photographed every document, carefully putting everything back where I found it. If he wanted to walk away, I would make sure it cost him dearly. Over the next few days, I quietly began preparing myself. I hired an attorney who specialized in family law, sharing every sordid detail, from the affair to the assault and financial deceit. She assured me that I had a strong case for both a divorce and significant compensation. Meanwhile, I continued to act as though nothing had happened. Greg carried on with his arrogance, unaware that I was systematically dismantling the comfortable life he had built on lies. The satisfaction of knowing what was coming kept me calm and focused, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control. A week later, Greg came home late from yet another night with Lillian, carrying himself with the same smug confidence that had enraged me since the night of the paint incident. I waited until he was seated, then calmly placed a stack of legal documents on the table in front of him. "What's this?" he asked, looking confused. "It's the end of this sham of a marriage," I replied, my voice as cool as ice. "You lied to me, betrayed me, and stole from me. Now you're going to pay for it." The color drained from Greg's face as he looked at the stack of documents. His mouth opened slightly as he started flipping through them, realizing I wasn't bluffing. The papers included every detail: evidence of his financial theft, records of his affair with Lillian, and the lawsuit I had filed seeking compensation for both physical assault and emotional abuse. He looked back up at me, stammering, "Clara, you don't need to do this. We can work this out." I shook my head, feeling not a shred of sympathy for him. "When you slapped me and poured paint over my head, you crossed a line, Greg. There's no going back now." His arrogance seemed to falter, his confidence replaced with a look of desperation. "Please, Clara, this can't end like this. You don't understand. Things aren't as simple as they seem." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I replied coldly. "You betrayed me, you stole from me, and you assaulted me. This is the consequence of your actions." Greg stared at the documents, visibly panicking. His once smug demeanor crumbled as the reality of his situation sank in. He tried to defend himself, offering weak explanations, but I was done listening. Finally, he stood up and muttered, "Fine. If that's how you want it, I'll leave." Watching him gather his things, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. Once he was gone, the house fell into a profound silence. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, but I wasn't done yet. My attorney had advised me to follow through with a formal case, which would not only finalize the divorce, but also ensure that Greg paid for the harm he had caused. In the following weeks, I channeled my energy into preparing for the legal battle ahead. My attorney was a powerhouse. She reviewed every detail of Greg's financial misconduct, documenting each misstep and lie. Together, we built a strong case, piece by piece, ensuring that Greg would be held accountable. Greg had moved in with Lillian, and word spread quickly through our social circle about their new beginning. I couldn't care less what people thought. I was focused on reclaiming my life and seeking justice. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt a mixture of anxiety and resolve. I took my seat, trying to stay calm, while Greg and Lillian sat across from me. Lillian avoided my gaze, her expression subdued. It was a far cry from the smugness I had seen on her face the last time I saw her. Greg, however, seemed visibly anxious, his confidence waning as the proceedings began. My attorney presented the evidence meticulously. Every bank statement, every questionable transfer, and every piece of documentation that showed Greg's deceit was laid bare for the court to see. The assault was detailed too, supported by witness statements from close friends who had seen the physical evidence of his abuse in the days following the incident. Greg squirmed in his seat as the evidence piled up, his face paling as the judge took notes. Lillian's gaze dropped, unable to meet my eyes. It was clear that this soulmate romance wasn't all she'd thought it would be. They had expected to walk away unscathed, to begin their new life together without consequence. But reality was a far cry from their romantic fantasy. After hours of testimony and evidence presentation, the judge finally delivered the verdict. Greg was ordered to repay every cent he had stolen, plus significant compensation for the emotional and physical trauma he had caused me. The restraining order was granted, preventing him from coming near me or my property again. Additionally, there were penalties for his financial misconduct that left him in serious debt. As the judge read the final terms, I glanced across the courtroom and saw Greg's face ashen, defeated. Lillian shifted uncomfortably, looking like she'd rather be anywhere but there. The fantasy they had built for themselves was crumbling, piece by piece, under the weight of accountability. Leaving the courthouse, I felt a mixture of relief and liberation. 6 years of marriage had ended, but I felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had finally been lifted. I walked out of that building with my head held high, knowing I had taken back control of my life. With the divorce finalized and the compensation awarded, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. The house, once filled with reminders of Greg, became a space of my own. I redecorated, filling it with vibrant artwork, cozy furniture, and lush plants. The reminders of him vanished, replaced by things that brought me joy. I even framed a few mementos from my favorite soap operas, symbols of resilience that now held a deeper meaning. Work became a refuge. I poured my energy into my career, building stronger relationships with colleagues who had quietly supported me through the painful end of my marriage. The freedom I felt was intoxicating, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere I had endured with Greg. One day, while organizing a company event, I met Liam, a fellow organizer with an easygoing smile and a warm personality. We struck up a conversation, bonding over shared experiences and our mutual love for soap operas. He recommended a few of his favorite series, and I found myself laughing and talking with him in a way I hadn't with anyone in years. Our friendship blossomed naturally. Liam was understanding and respectful, never pushing or prying. He knew about my past, but he never treated me with pity or curiosity, just understanding. He respected the boundaries I'd set, and over time, I found myself beginning to trust him. We started meeting up for coffee, then dinners, and eventually, weekend trips to nearby places. Each moment with him felt like a breath of fresh air, a reminder that I could find joy and peace after so much pain. Months passed, and with each passing day, the weight of my past grew lighter. I indulged in my favorite soap operas with a sense of humor rather than longing, knowing that my life no longer mirrored those fictional dramas. The pain of betrayal had faded, replaced by a sense of peace. One evening, as Liam and I watched a soap opera together, he turned to me, his eyes soft. "Have you ever thought about visiting Spain? Seeing the places we've watched on screen?" The idea sparked a sense of adventure in me, something I hadn't felt in years. "Yes," I replied, smiling at the thought. "I'd love that." We began planning the trip, not as an escape, but as a celebration of the life I had reclaimed. I didn't need validation from anyone else. I was enough, just as I was. And though my life had taken more twists and turns than any soap opera, I was finally ready to embrace the happiness I deserved. A year had passed since I walked out of that courthouse and closed the chapter on Greg and Lillian for good. With each passing month, I found myself embracing a life I had once only dreamed of, one that was free of betrayal and fear. Our trip to Spain, Liam and I, was nothing short of magical. We wandered the vibrant streets of Madrid, explored the stunning beaches of Costa del Sol, and indulged in Spanish cuisine, savoring every moment as if it were a gift. For the first time in years, I felt light and carefree, laughing easily and basking in the warmth of Liam's kindness. The dramas we once only watched on screen were now replaced with real moments of joy, peace, and love. Returning home, I found my work to be fulfilling in a way I hadn't experienced before. My dedication and renewed energy were noticed, and soon I received a promotion, one that allowed me to lead my own team. It felt like a milestone, a reward for everything I had endured and overcome. My colleagues became like family, a constant source of support and encouragement. And slowly but surely, my house transformed into a sanctuary, a reflection of who I had become. There were moments when I'd remember Greg and Lillian, but they felt like shadows from a distant past, no longer able to touch the life I was building. Greg's legal and financial troubles weighed heavily on him, I heard, and he'd moved out of state to avoid the social fallout. The thought of his downfall didn't bring me joy, nor did it bring pain. Instead, it felt like closure, a reminder of how far I had come. One evening, as Liam and I shared a quiet dinner at home, he took my hand and looked into my eyes, his face thoughtful. "You know, Clara, meeting you changed my life. Watching you turn your pain into strength, it's inspiring. I'm grateful every day that we found each other." I smiled, feeling a surge of warmth. "You helped me find myself, Liam. You gave me the space to heal and the courage to dream again. I'm grateful too." Our lives moved forward together, not as a fairy tale romance, but as a partnership built on trust, respect, and resilience. There were no grandiose words, no promises of perfection, just an understanding that we'd stand by each other through whatever life brought our way. On the anniversary of my divorce, I raised a glass with Liam, toasting not to revenge or bitterness, but to freedom and happiness. That night, I wrote a letter to my past self, a woman who had endured betrayal, who had been humiliated and hurt, but who had found the strength to rise again. I promised her that I would never lose sight of the strength that had carried her through the darkest days. And as I looked around my home, filled with light, laughter, and love, I knew I had found something far more valuable than anything Greg had taken from me. I had found myself. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of resilience, empowerment, and fresh beginnings. Share your thoughts below, and stay tuned for more captivating tales of courage and healing.